You'll see with this lesson 37 two diagrams. The second is very complex because the times that we're looking at are very, very complex. In fact, I don't even intend to go into this lesson in great depth. With this lesson, there are 3 other helps. First of all, please read the scriptures that are asked for and then read the lesson. After that, you will just gain a certain smattering of what is going on in Jerusalem and Judah that is of such great importance that we even have the 2 books of Maccabees. They are not in the Protestant Bible. For a long time I thought that was probably the wisest thing about the Protestant Bible, because this history is so intricate, so difficult to really get under your belt. However, it is very important nevertheless. That is why the Church has included it in the Holy Bible from ancient times. Because right now, in Jerusalem and Judah, terrible forces are going to come that they must resist if you and I are going to enjoy, not only enjoy, be blessed by the Holy Catholic Church. The dear people in Judah, well, let's just look at this first diagram. And we'll lightly skim over it. As I say, if you are interested to fill in the details, you will have them in your outline and, of course, in the synopsis of the books of these 2 books of the Bible. In Jerusalem, we've seen quite goings-on from the time that the dear pilgrims, shall we call them, come back from exile with high hopes, with the Edict of Cyrus behind them, up there on the very top, and then the agonies and the hard work of actually facing things as they are. We have almost, 100 years before there is a fairly nice temple and walls built around Jerusalem. And then in 395 we find Ezra coming to tighten the law in Jerusalem so that the purity of the Torah will remain for the future to build upon. Totally important. We've seen Joel and Jonah prophesy for Israel during those later times, expressing 2 different strong-held feelings about the situation for Israel. Now, during these years in Jerusalem and Judah, other parts of the world are coming into play. Chiefly the Greek world, which is going to pose the problem that Maccabees will face. It is the Greek world impinging on the revealed faith of the Jews that causes the turmoil of the 2 books of Maccabees. Because while Israel is regaining its feet and its strength in the law in the little territory we call Judah, the Greek world is well awake and well alive, for this is the era of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. While Jerusalem is concerned about the revealed faith, actually the 10 Commandments, the Greek world the great thinkers of the Greek world are trying to answer the great questions plaguing mankind. Who is man? What is his chief happiness? And how does he achieve it? And how does the community of man best achieve the wholeness and wholeness mostly of the human being? That is what these thinkers have been applying themselves to. And when we come to Aristotle, we have reached that philosopher that will be referred to as the philosopher for 1,500 years. The brilliance of Aristotle. And just under his name, we have the capital letters of Alexander the Great. His story is really fascinating, and I understand there has been a movie put out about Alexander, and it would make a very dramatic happening, all right. Alexander comes on the stage when he was 20 years old. His father, Philip, has been a king, and he has developed a war machine that proves to be very effective. He dies when a courtier kills him, and his young son, Alexander, who has had the greatest teacher that probably the world has ever known in Aristotle, comes along to pick up on that army, to make great comrades with the generals who were his father's friends, and he whirls through the world, defeating one country after another, and establishing the great and wondrous Greek city, where the human being, for the first time in the history of the world, is put in the center, and his attributes enhanced by all of the cultural advantages that the Greeks have brought into play. Alexander defeats the last of the Persian kings, Darius III, and after a campaign that takes him to India and back through what's now Afghanistan, he dies. Whoa, just like that. He's barely, 33 years old? He dies after having quite a party in which he is probably drunk, but he also has perhaps malaria, and much to the surprise of everyone, that vigorous young man is dead. He has failed in only his own personal life by probably being alcoholic and losing the friendship of those generals because he assumes a kind of godlike state. All of this is written up in your lesson. So what's the problem? Well, he's established the Greek culture all right. The great cities that he has placed across the whole Mideast, all the way almost to India, have brought Greek culture. It has brought the citizens of those cities to a new level of being able to use gifts that the human being has been given by God in a new way. And you will read about the achievements of Alexandria in Egypt, where there's a great university with some of the intelligent people who have contributed all of the sciences, from physicians all the way to astronomers and beyond. And that is the legacy of the Greeks. So what's the problem? Well, as the time goes on, and of course the empire is divided now with three of those generals that had been friends and companions and warriors with Alexander. They fight among themselves, and they will go on fighting among themselves, and their descendants will fight among themselves for 150 years. There will be Macedonia, Syria, and Egypt all at each other's throats. And what will happen in Jerusalem is going to be key, because this king that's on your page, Antiochus III, of course, will take Palestine from Egypt, which the Jews will be fairly happy about. But it's his son, Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, who, in a wild kind of temper, will come back to Jerusalem to force them into Greek ways. Well, you say, Greek ways, they sound pretty good. They elevate the human being. They give him the freedom of his intelligence. They put away superstitions. What's wrong with that? Well, think about it a minute. Who is the center of the universe? What is it that the Jews have held that is so unique in this world? They have held the faith and the law of God. Of God. Who is the center of the universe? God. No, the Greeks have thrown out the Greek gods as being fairly foolish, and have put man at the center of the universe. Actually, when you think about the conflicts in our own society, it's between those who have the Greek consciousness, let's put man at the center of everything, and whatever seems best for him we'll elevate. We aren't too sure about God, it's all right, but let's put him in his place. Had this philosophy taken over the world at the time of the Greeks, if Jerusalem had not stood firm, and they were tempted. The Greeks came in and built a gymnasium. Naked men exhibiting their strength would wrestle with each other. The Jews, in the purity of faith, hated it. They couldn't bear to have holy Jerusalem taken over by the Greeks. And the Greeks, under Antiochus IV Epiphanes, were emboldened to do just that. Alongside of this terrible conflict now that is emerging, and of course you get graphic illustrations in 2 Maccabees of the terrible suffering that the Jews are going to undergo, and because of that suffering, up come a family, Mattathias, and his strong sons, led by Judas, to fight against the Greeks. And this is the story of 1st and 2nd Maccabees. And we'll look at that a little bit in the next diagram, because this poor lesson, it takes 2 diagrams. All right, over on the far right, we have the rise of Rome. And even under the Jerusalem-Judah column, the first column, we see that in 67 BC, Rome will take Jerusalem. Rome will take over Palestine, because the war machine in Rome is going to be the strongest ever. We're going to see that Hannibal, a story about Hannibal taking his elephants over the Alps, almost conquers Rome, but Rome simply picks up on the warrior consciousness and abilities of Hannibal and enlarges them until it rules the world. under Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar. Now there's a name that will appear in the New Testament with the birth of Jesus. So this is a transition time. These years from whatever it is here, 167 to the time of Jesus' birth are critical in understanding the various forces at work in Jerusalem and in Judah at the time that Jesus is born. So this is a most important time, at least to understand the various parties that arise during these years. If you want to understand who are the Sadducees, who are the Pharisees, who are the Essenes, who are the Zealots. These people are very freely talked about in the New Testament, and their roots, where they came from, take place during this time when the Greeks are attempting to take over the rule of faith in Jerusalem. So, this is why it's an important time. We'll find that the Sadducees are those who slowly develop a tolerance for foreign rule. They are usually the higher class in Jerusalem. They usually have more power, and they're inclined to soften the stance of Judaism against these foreign invaders of theology and philosophy. They're more amenable to change. They're not so apt to call upon God in heaven, certainly not by name. They will call him the blessings or the heavens or some other way to be a little less than direct. They don't like to cause problems with their rulers. And they usually benefit from that too. So there's the Sadducees. The Pharisees, however, have a most turbulent time. They are really directly related to these Maccabees. They are not going to give in. They are not going to lessen their faith. They are not going to do anything but talk about God in heaven. And they believe in angels, and they believe in the resurrection, and they are a bit of a thorn in the flesh of the continuing history in Jerusalem as they demand certain protocols kept the way they are. And the Essenes, well, they're so dismayed by the whole mess because they think even the Pharisees are too lenient. The Essenes go off and form their own community along the shores of the Dead Sea. And when you have the slide program that goes with these later lessons, you will see many actual illustrations taken from the Dead Sea Scrolls, that will actually the home that they came from, which is this fortress on a height looking over the Dead Sea that was built by the Essenes. There's some thought that maybe John the Baptist was an Essene because of his preaching. What he was all about is very like theirs. So with the Zealots, of course, are on zeal for the law, hate all foreigners who come to take over, are apt to be rebels, and are killed freely by the Romans for that. So that gives you a little indication of why these years are so important for our study. Now with this, I'm not going to go any more detail about Alexander, though I'm actually kind of taken by him. But I'll leave that to you, and there are also pictures taken from the Life magazine in the slide programs. showing you the exploits of Alexander the Great.